Hi, I'm Terza. I showed up to work like any other day, doing my job, quietly, consistently. But then my own sister poured hot coffee on my lap during a company lunch, and people laughed. No one spoke up, no one stopped her, and just when I thought I'd finally disappeared completely, my husband walked in. Not just any husband, a billionaire. And within minutes, he fired everyone in that room. But that wasn't even the worst part. The real betrayal? It started way before the coffee. What if your own family spent years erasing you, one harmless moment at a time? Would you even notice until it's too late? Let me tell you what really happened. I stood in the lobby of Monroe Analytics, one hand gripping a tray of 3 coffees, the other balancing a brown paper bag of breakfast wraps that were already staining through with grease. The doors behind me slowly eased shut, leaving the damp Seattle morning behind. But the chill followed me anyway. A few people from marketing passed by without so much as a nod. One of the interns, Nick, I think, glanced up from his phone just long enough to say, "Hey, Terza, you mind grabbing a couple extra creamers next time?" No smile. No thanks. Just expected. I kept moving, because what else was I going to do? Explain to him that I was the one who wrote the predictive sales model they were using this quarter? That I had an MBA from UCLA, not a hospitality degree? That I wasn't the damn office barista? Instead, I gave him a half smile and said, "Sure thing." By the time I reached the second floor, the heat from the coffee had bled through the sleeves of my blouse, and my arm was starting to ache. I paused just long enough to shift the tray, my eyes landing on the giant framed poster above the main staircase. Marla's face. My sister. "Meet the visionary behind Monroe Analytics," the caption read. She was smiling in the photo, head tilted slightly like she always did when she was posing but pretending not to. The same smile she wore when she convinced our parents I was too sensitive as a kid. The same one she gave board members when taking credit for work she didn't do. I was already late for the Monday meeting. The boardroom was full when I stepped in. Sleek, expensive chairs arranged around the long glass table, the giant screen at the head already blinking with Marla's presentation. I placed the coffees at her seat, the bag beside them. She didn't look up, didn't thank me, she just kept talking. "And if we're serious about Q3 growth," she said, "we need to think bigger than projections. We need disruption." That was my cue. I had spent the weekend building a model that could predict regional purchasing behavior based on local weather trends. It wasn't just good. It was the kind of thing that could shift entire sales patterns. I cleared my throat. "Actually, Marla held up a hand. "Let's save the math class for later. We're not running a school here." Laughter, easy, comfortable laughter, from people who had never once asked me what I did all day. I sat down without another word. A VP, Thomas, asked, "What's Terza's role again?" Marla didn't miss a beat. "Oh, she's kind of floating support, like a utility player. She's helpful." Helpful. That word stuck in my throat like a splinter. I looked around the table, hoping someone, anyone, would glance my way. But they all either avoided my gaze or stared blankly, like I was part of the furniture. So I pulled out my notebook, the same one no one ever asked to read, and pretended to take notes while a part of me quietly broke into pieces. When the meeting wrapped, I gathered the empty cups and napkins without being asked. The room emptied quickly, everyone too eager to get back to their desks and their inboxes. I stayed a moment longer, needing space to breathe. That's when I felt it. Eyes on me. I turned and saw Lucian Draper, head of legal, standing just outside the doorway. He was older, quiet, the kind of man who said very little but watched everything. His eyes met mine. For a second, I thought he might speak. Say something. Acknowledge what he'd seen. But he just nodded once, almost imperceptibly, and walked away. Voice in my head. Of course he didn't say anything. Silence is safe. Silence keeps jobs. Later that afternoon, I stepped into the elevator just as Mallory slid in beside me. She was young, sharp, and ambitious, an intern last year, now rising fast. Not because she was better, just because she played the game better. She leaned in slightly. Hey, I hope you don't mind, but Marla asked me to present your deck next week. She said you'd be cool with it. Cool with it? I blinked at her. Sure, I said, voice even. No problem. Mallory smiled. Thanks. I mean, you laid all the groundwork. I'll just polish it up a bit. We rode the rest of the way in silence. That night, I stayed late. No one else was around. The building was quiet in the way only offices are after dark. Light humming from the ceiling, distant tapping from an HVAC unit that hadn't been serviced in years. I sat at my desk, staring at my own name written in the corner of my slide deck, and wondered how long it would take before even I forgot I was the one who made it. They didn't need to fire me to make me feel erased. They just stopped seeing me. The next morning, I arrived earlier than usual, thinking maybe if I beat the noise, I could reclaim a little peace before the day started chipping away again. The office was still half lit, mostly quiet, save for the hum of vending machines and the clack of heels from someone in the marketing team arriving just after me. I headed toward the lunchroom, needing water more than caffeine this time. I passed a cluster of interns huddled near the corner booth. They weren't laughing loudly, but they were trying not to. They dispersed the second they saw me. No greetings, no guilt either. I didn't ask. I just walked over to the fridge, pulled a bottle of water, and caught a glimpse of one of their phones left face down on the table. But someone beat me to it. Hey, whispered Joanna from accounting. She held her phone screen low between us. I'm not supposed to show you this, but you deserve to know. On the screen. An email thread, forwarded so many times the chain was barely readable. But what was clear, crystal clear, was the image. Me, wiping down the whiteboard in Conference B. Captioned, When Nepotism Comes with a Mop. Above the image, the subject line read, Queen Bee with no hive. Underneath, a reply. At least she's good at cleaning up Marla's messes. Joanna looked at me, apologetic. I didn't laugh, she whispered. I nodded once, said nothing. Took my water and left the room. Back at my desk, I stared out the window. The clouds were thick that morning, heavier than usual for a Seattle spring. I didn't cry. I didn't even get angry. I just sat with the weight of it, letting it settle where it always did. Deep, invisible, just below the surface. They didn't even try to hide it anymore. I wasn't just overlooked, I was a punchline. The monthly recognition meeting was that afternoon. One of those pseudo-celebrations meant to show how valued employees were. Bagels, balloons, a PowerPoint loop on the wall with smiling headshots and vague bullet points like made an impact or elevated our culture. I wasn't expecting anything, but I hadn't expected this either. The slideshow clicked through each name, each shiny face. Then came the Data Innovation Award. That one stung, because it was mine. The model, my model, was highlighted for projecting market shifts based on user behavior trends. Except, under the recognition line, Mallory Penn. Not even a mention of my name, not in the corner, not in fine print, nothing. Marla stood at the front, perfectly poised, the very picture of leadership. Our young talent is what pushes us forward, she said, gesturing toward Mallory with pride. The applause was loud, loud enough to drown out the white noise ringing in my ears. Lucien caught my eye from across the room. He didn't look away this time, but he didn't say anything either. That evening, I left the meeting early and headed toward the vending machine. I didn't need a snack. I just needed to step away. Think. Breathe. I tried to feed the machine a wrinkled dollar bill. It spat it back. I flattened it, tried again. Same result. On the third try, it swallowed the bill, blinked twice, then did nothing. The screen froze. I just stood there. It was stupid, insignificant, a minor annoyance. But something about it cracked the surface I'd been holding together all day. My hand shook. Not from the machine, but from everything. You don't break from the big blows, I whispered. It's the small cuts, the echo of your own name, erased. I returned to my desk just before sunset. The office had cleared out. Marla had gone home. Mallory, too. Sitting there, under the dull light, I noticed a folder placed neatly on my chair. No note. I opened it. Inside, a printed version of my latest presentation, the one I'd drafted for the product team's quarterly pivot. Every slide intact, every chart exactly as I'd laid it out. Except for one thing, Mallory's watermark, bottom right corner of every page. My name, nowhere. I didn't even flinch, not anymore. I walked over to the printer tray, checked the timestamp. Printed that afternoon, 2 hours before the recognition meeting. I returned to my desk, sat down, logged into my email, opened a draft. Subject, documentation, Number 1. Attachment, scanned copy of the folder. Body, blank. I hit send, to myself. I stared at the screen a few seconds longer, then shut the laptop. They thought I was quiet because I didn't know how to fight. What they didn't know is I had just started. The office was empty by the time I left. I walked slowly through the parking garage, letting the echo of my heels follow me like a shadow that had learned too well how to stay silent. On the drive home, I didn't turn on the radio. I needed the quiet. Not to think, thinking hurt, but to let my thoughts unravel without judgment. The next day, we had an investor visit. One of those high-pressure showcases Marla thrived on. The kind where we pretended everyone was aligned, efficient, inspired. The kind where she reminded everyone, subtly of course, that this company bore her name, even if it technically belonged to our parents. The investor was an older man named Bennett. Friendly, but clearly calculating. The type that read between words more than he listened to them. He shook hands, asked too many questions, and smiled like he already knew who was getting the next funding round. Marla met him at the front, our mother right behind her. Velda Keegan, the matriarch. She wore a tailored navy suit, hair swept back so tight it made her look like she was always in control. She greeted Bennett with a tone of polished confidence and guided him into the hallway like she owned the building, which, in a way, she did. "This is Marla," she said, gesturing with a proud hand. "My daughter. The brain behind all of this." I stood 3 feet away. Velda didn't look at me. She didn't introduce me. She didn't even acknowledge my presence. Bennett turned to me anyway, politely puzzled. "And you are?" "Oh," I said, smiling just enough to be civil. "I'm the one who wipes down the whiteboard." He blinked, then let out a confused chuckle, like maybe it was a joke. It wasn't. Later that evening, Velda insisted we all have dinner with the investor. She made a reservation at some high-end seafood place downtown, white tablecloths, waiters who called you ma'am, without irony. The kind of place where they hand you a wine list longer than the actual menu. I didn't want to go, but not going would have looked petty. Weak. So I showed up, smiled through the introductions, and sat quietly while Velda bragged about Marla's debate trophies from high school and her early admission to Stanford, even though she ended up transferring after 2 semesters. She never mentioned that I'd earned a full ride to UCLA, or that I graduated early, or that I'd once presented at a national conference before I was 30. She talked about Marla like she was the only daughter she ever had. I picked at my food, listened, watched Marla laugh and dazzle, and somewhere between the lobster bisque and the seared halibut, I realized the truth. There comes a moment when silence doesn't protect them anymore. It only exposes you. Back at the office later that week, I had to drop off a hard copy file in Marla's office. It was late, most of the staff had left, and I figured I'd just leave it on her desk and go. Her door was ajar. I stepped in. That's when I heard my mother's voice. "Listen," she said, her tone clipped and impatient. "You need to transition her out. Sooner, not later. People are starting to ask questions." Marla exhaled audibly. "She's not going anywhere. That's the problem." "She's too close. You know how this works. Keep her in the room, but far from the table." "I've been doing that for 6 months," Marla snapped. "She's just quiet. She doesn't fight. She never has." I didn't move. just stood there, still as air. Quiet, but not empty. I gently set the file on a side table and stepped back out of the office. My heart wasn't racing. My hands weren't shaking. I didn't even feel angry. I felt awake. Back at my desk, I opened a new email. Subject: documentation to do. Attachment: audio recording from my phone, still running in my coat pocket. I hit send. That night, at home, I sat on the floor of my apartment in an oversized sweatshirt, a cup of tea going cold beside me. I pulled out a shoebox filled with old family photos. One of them, me, age 10, holding up a science fair ribbon, had Marla in the background, arms crossed, not smiling. I used to think I was invisible because I wasn't good enough. But I wasn't invisible because I lacked value. I was invisible because I refused to shrink to fit their image of what enough looked like. That was the night I created a new folder on my laptop. Contingency plan. Because if they were going to come for me, I wasn't just going to sit there. I'd been underestimated for too long. And if they thought I wouldn't fight back, they weren't watching closely enough. I spent the next morning pacing my apartment, letting the kettle boil over twice and forgetting where I put my keys. I wasn't panicking, I was preparing. There's a difference. By the time I walked into the office, everything in me had shifted. I wasn't there to survive anymore. I was there to remember who I was before I let them rewrite me. I dropped my bag at my desk and checked my voicemail. I hadn't cleared them in weeks. Couldn't stomach hearing one more just checking in or circling back. But today, I did. Second message down, a woman's voice came through, professional but warm. Hi, Ms. Monroe. This is Kayla from Eastbrook Data. We met briefly at the Boston Tech Summit in June. Our Director of Strategy is moving to Europe, and we'd love to talk to you about stepping into that role. We think your work with consumer behavioral modeling is exactly the direction we need. Give us a call if you're open to a conversation. The date on the message? 5 weeks ago. I sat very still, listening to the beep that ended the message. Boston, director level, a real offer, real recognition. And I had turned it down. Or worse, ignored it. Because 6 weeks ago, Marla had looked me in the eyes and said, I can't save this company without you, T. I trust you more than anyone. I thought I was helping my sister rebuild something worth saving. Turns out, I was just hammering nails into my own coffin. Later that afternoon, we had our quarterly strategy meeting. I knew what was coming, or I thought I did. The presentation was titled Predictive Models for Consumer Pulse. That was mine. My code, my project, my sweat. I watched as the screen lit up with my charts, my formulas, my structure, repackaged under a fresh title. Mallory walked to the front of the room in a pressed blouse and patent leather heels, smiling like she'd spent the last 3 months coding in the dark. She began with, I'm proud to present a predictive framework we've been building to anticipate regional consumer behavior. We? Mallory didn't even know the difference between logistic and linear regression until I explained it to her last month. And there it was. Marla standing at the back, nodding along, proud as a mother at a recital. She didn't speak until the end, then clapped twice and said, exactly what I envisioned when I hired fresh minds to shake things up. Fresh minds. I sat frozen, every cell in my body screaming, but my face stayed calm. When the meeting ended, I opened my inbox. Right on time, an automated message appeared. Subject: Thank you. Body: Great note-taking today, Tirza. Your support makes everything run smoother. Support: I walked slowly back to my desk, shut my laptop, then opened the draft folder on my desktop. Inside was the original version of the deck, the one with my name on every page, my notes in the margin, time-stamped edits saved on a cloud account I controlled. There was no denying it. No room for, maybe you misunderstood. I highlighted the entire folder and dragged it into the contingency plan, phase 2 directory. Then I backed it up in 3 more places. After work, I skipped the bus and walked instead. Needed the air, the space. By the time I got home, the sky was already fading to blue-gray. I poured a glass of wine, sat at the kitchen table, and opened my laptop again. I stared at the screen for a full minute. Then, I remembered a name Dorian had mentioned once. Someone he'd worked with during a merger in Chicago. A lawyer who specialized in intellectual property disputes. I found her email. Attached the full folder. No note. No signature. Just the subject line. Intellectual property theft. Internal evidence attached. I hit send. That night, I didn't sleep much. But I didn't toss and turn either. I was done waiting for someone else to call it what it was. This time, I was sending the signal, and someone was going to answer it. By the time the office lights flicked on the next morning, I was already seated, at the far corner of the conference room, right next to the humming printer. It wasn't even subtle. My name had been left off the agenda again. No welcome slide, no introduction, not even a seating card. Junior staffers sat at the main table, some with less than 6 months of experience. Mallory had a full section to herself. She glanced my way briefly, then turned back to her tablet. She knew. They all did. I didn't ask questions. I didn't try to fix it. I just pulled out my phone, opened the voice recorder, and set it face down beside my notepad. The presentation began with a bloated slideshow packed with recycled metrics, half of which had originated in my research. When one of the interns incorrectly summarized a data set I'd built from scratch, no one corrected her. When Marla stepped in to wrap things up, she nodded toward the team like a school principal on awards day. "These are the future of Monroe Analytics," she said, all smile and spin. "And let's be honest, fresh eyes see things we often miss." Fresh eyes, like mine, were cataracts. The meeting ran long. When it finally ended, I waited until the hallway cleared before packing up. I reached for my bag when a new email pinged on my screen. It had been sent to a small group, myself accidentally included. Subject, Thursday debrief, internal only. The first line? Honestly, she's just good for coffee runs and filling out the diversity line item. Another reply came seconds later. She still thinks she's in the running for VP. Adorable. And one more. We should frame that mop picture. Or better yet, name a conference room after her. I didn't react, not outwardly. I hit forward. 2. My secure email. Subject, documentation, Server 3. Body, empty. I closed the tab, then walked calmly out of the room and into the hallway, where Marla was standing near the coffee station, chatting with Bennett, the investor. Her voice was light, performative, the way it always was when she had something to gain. She noticed me. "T, don't forget to restock the sugar packets. I think we're low again." I stepped forward, just close enough for her to hear me. "If you push again," I said, steady and quiet, "I'll push back, not like before, not silently." Her mouth curved into that practice smile she used in press photos. "Oh, come on, sis. Lighten up. It's just work." But there was a pause, barely half a second, before she spoke again. That hesitation was all I needed. Back at my desk, I opened the storage drawer and found the printed slides from last week's meeting, the ones with the wrong data Mallory had presented. I clipped a note to the top, no accusations, just corrections, and placed it in Lucian's internal mail slot. He found me an hour later. Didn't say a word. Just walked past and slipped a folded paper into the side pocket of my tote bag. Inside, a printed copy of the email chain, the same one I'd already forwarded. But it wasn't from me. Someone else had flagged it. Someone inside the circle. I stared at it for a long time, my fingers tracing the words like they might burn. They didn't. Not anymore. The hallway outside buzzed with Friday energy, casual conversations, lunch plans, weekend jokes. But something else floated in the air now. A weight, a slowness, like the room was holding its breath. Maybe it was me, maybe it was them. Because when truth lingers too long in silence, even the liars start looking over their shoulders. The next time I saw Marla, it was during the Friday investor luncheon. The kind of event where everything is staged just right. Name cards, catered salad bowls, scripted toasts. Even the water had lemon slices floating like performance props. I knew better than to expect anything less than theater, but I didn't expect what came next. I was standing by the long table near the windows, quietly pouring myself a second cup of coffee. The room was buzzing with carefully curated small talk when Marla swept in, perfectly timed and perfectly dressed, two tall lattes in her hands. Her eyes scanned the room, then landed on me with that familiar glint I had learned not to trust. She walked toward me, smiling like it meant something, and at the very last second, tripped. The coffee cup in her right hand flew up, arced slightly, then landed squarely in my lap. The heat punched through my dress slacks before the pain even registered. "Oh no!" she gasped, voice high and sugar-coated, eyes widening. "Tirza, I'm so sorry! Still your favorite, right?" People laughed. Not everyone, but enough. A few turned away. One or two looked like they wanted to say something but didn't. My skin was burning, my thighs stung, the fabric clinging in wet patches. I didn't shout, didn't flinch. I looked her dead in the eye, smiled, just enough to confuse her, and then walked out of the room, slowly and upright, coffee soaking through every step. I went straight to the restroom, locked the stall, and stood there, breathing. One hand on the cold metal wall, the other resting against the scarlet stain growing on my thigh. This wasn't clumsy, it wasn't accidental. It was her final warning. But what she didn't know was, it was also mine. I changed into a pair of workout leggings I kept in my locker, cleaned up the best I could, and returned to my desk. A new email waited in my inbox. Subject line: "Congratulations, Mallory." I opened it, and there it was in bold. "Please join us in welcoming Mallory Penn to her new role as Director of Data Operations," the position I had outlined, the department I had spent months rebuilding, the workflow I had designed from scratch, handed over like a party favor. And below the announcement, a quote from Marla: "Young women like Mallory are the future of Monroe Analytics." I didn't feel betrayed anymore. I felt confirmed. It wasn't neglect. It was strategy, and I'd played right into it. Until now. I opened the encrypted folder on my personal drive. I uploaded the footage from the security camera near the elevator, full view of the spill. The angle was perfect. Her trajectory, her smirk a second before impact. Crystal clear? Then I added the mentorship logs, the full document trail showing every time I reviewed Mallory's data, corrected her models, prepped her presentations, dates, signatures, even her notes in my handwriting. The folder name had already been decided. Public disclosure, Stage 1. I opened my leather-bound journal and wrote just one sentence. They gave me coffee. I'll give them fire. By early evening, most of the office had emptied. Only a few lights remained on across the floor. I was updating documentation for the legal team when I heard a knock at my door. Not loud, just enough. Lucien stood in the hallway, expression unreadable. He didn't speak. He just walked over and placed a brown envelope on my desk, then turned and left. Inside, an HR complaint form, already signed, anonymous. But the wording was unmistakable. It referenced a hostile incident in a public professional setting. It named no names, but the incident description could only be one thing: the coffee. At the bottom, the HR officer's handwriting read, "Filed under review." I leaned back in my chair, exhaled slowly. There were eyes now, watching, quietly, maybe even regretfully. Not everyone would say something. Not everyone was brave. But not everyone was blind anymore either. And if they wanted a show, they were about to get one they couldn't delete. That following Monday began like any other, but something about the stillness in the room felt rehearsed. Too clean, too coordinated. By mid-morning, the announcement hit every inbox. Subject: Leadership in Sync. Meet the Monroe Women Body. Sisterhood in Innovation. The Monroe women leading together. I stared at the subject line, blinking once before opening it. There it was. A full-page press release, glossy and glowing. A photo of Marla and me, smiling side by side. Except I hadn't smiled like that in months. The picture was from last year's holiday mixer, cropped and filtered to remove the people around us, altered just enough to make us look like a united front. The caption read, "A legacy of trust, vision, and sisterhood." Marla was quoted beneath it. "My sister and I have always believed in building this together. We thrive because we lead together." I didn't know whether to laugh or throw my mug across the room. Instead, I clicked print. As the page slid out of the tray, I whispered under my breath. The photo was real. The moment never happened. 2 hours later, I got a ping from a client I hadn't spoken to in a while. Marcus, from Denver. He forwarded a proposal that had been sent to him for a new cross-regional data analysis initiative. His message was short. "Hey, Tirza, didn't you mention this structure to me last quarter?" I opened the attachment. My structure, my analysis flow, my predictive grid. Word for word. Only 2 names were listed, Mallory Penn and Marla Keegan. No acknowledgement, not a footnote, not a based on a concept by. Nothing. But there it was, buried in the metadata. My watermark. Dated. Logged. Unmistakable. I stared at the screen, then slowly closed my laptop. They weren't just trying to erase me. They were replacing me, in real time. One asset, one headline, one client proposal at a time. That afternoon, the company held a quarterly town hall. All hands, cameras rolling, clients and partners on Zoom. The topic? Shared Vision, Monroe's Next Chapter. Marla took the stage wearing her signature navy blazer and a smile sharp enough to cut glass. She launched into a speech about leadership, vision, and family legacy. I sat in the back row, perfectly still. I didn't interrupt. I didn't raise my voice. I waited until the Q&A. When they opened the floor, I stood up. Calm, steady. "Marla," I said, "can you clarify when exactly you and I last co-authored a project together?" You could hear the air change. The mic handler hesitated. Someone coughed. Marla blinked, only slightly, but it was enough. She forced a smile. "Tirza, I'm not sure that's relevant to today's discussion." "No?" I tilted my head. "Because it's relevant to the article you published this morning, and it's certainly relevant to the client proposal sent to Denver yesterday." Silence. A junior staffer raised her hand and said carefully, "Didn't Tirza design Project Cora?" Another voice chimed in, this time from the tech team. "Yeah, the predictive grid was hers. We beta tested it back in October." Then Lucian stood up, quiet but firm. "I can confirm the time-stamped files. The source material is Tirza Monroe's." No one laughed. No one looked away this time. I looked around the room. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to plead. She built a family of mirrors. I lit one match. And just like that, the silence that once protected her was about to testify against her. After the town hall ended, people left the auditorium quickly, but not toward me. No one said anything, not even Lucien. His usual nod was replaced with lowered eyes as he passed my row. Back at my desk, I ate lunch alone again. The cold pasta I brought from home tasted like cardboard, but I kept chewing, one bite after another, like always. No one sat next to me. No one mentioned the Q&A. No one acknowledged what they'd heard, because doing so might require choosing a side, and that would mean risk. It's funny how silence isn't neutral. It just waits to see who's going to win before it speaks. I was clearing my dishes when the elevator bell dinged. The sound wasn't unusual, until I heard it again. A pause. Then the steps. 2 men in dark suits walked out first, scanning the room like they already knew where to go. Then came the third figure. Dorian. He didn't wear the usual softness he carried at home. No loosened tie, no casual button-down. He wore a fitted black suit, no tie, eyes focused straight ahead. It wasn't just his clothes. It was the way the air shifted around him, like the room had finally decided to listen. Marla appeared from her office, faltering just slightly. She put on her usual grin, the one she reserved for investors, for cameras. But her shoulders weren't sitting right. "Dorian," she said, as if she'd just bumped into an old college friend. "We weren't expecting—" He cut her off with a quiet, "Let's make this brief." The boardroom doors opened as if on cue. I followed. Not because I was told to, because I knew what was coming. Inside the room, Marla sat at the head, flanked by 3 executive assistants. Lucien took his seat silently. I stayed standing. Dorian placed a single manila folder in front of her, then another in front of Lucien. "Transfer of controlling interest," he said simply. "Effective immediately. Monroe Analytics now belongs, majority, to Wexler Holdings. It's been a quiet acquisition by design." Marla's face didn't fall. It froze. "This is a joke." Dorian remained still. "No. What's been happening in this company for the last year? That's the joke. I'm here to end it." She laughed once, sharp. "You bought us out? That's your revenge for me defending this place?" He didn't flinch. "You defended a lie. You curated a brand. You erased people." Then he turned to Lucien. "I'll be appointing interim compliance and ethics leadership, starting with a full audit of internal communications, reporting structures, and project authorship." Lucien gave a single, solid nod. Dorian looked to me next. I reached into my bag, pulled out a USB, and walked calmly to the screen at the front of the room. I plugged it in. 1 click. The first slide. A screenshot of the internal email where I was called Diversity Decor. Next, a proposal to a client with Mallory's name pasted over my model. Then, footage from the security camera showing Marla's very intentional coffee spill. And finally, a single slide with text in bold. "If silence protects the abuser, let noise redeem the truth." No music, no voiceover, just truth. Laid bare. Mallory, seated in the corner, buried her face in her hands. Lucien looked directly at Marla. "Do you have anything to say for yourself?" She blinked once, twice. "This is a hit job." "It's a correction," I said. Dorian stood. "Effective immediately, Marla Keegan is removed from her role. A review of all project leads will begin this week. Your contract is terminated, pending legal review." Marla's voice cracked. "You're doing this now? Here? In front of her?" Dorian didn't look at me when he said, "You did it to yourself. You just didn't expect anyone to say so out loud." She turned to our mother, Velda, seated at the far end of the room. Mom didn't speak. She didn't move. She stared out the window like she didn't recognize either of us. As the room emptied, one by one, I stayed behind. I wasn't done. I had one last thing to say. I waited until the last door clicked shut behind them. The boardroom was still, except for the quiet hum of the projector cooling down. I walked over and removed the USB from the port, tucking it into the inside pocket of my blazer, like I'd done it 100 times before. I didn't need to say anything more. But I did. I turned toward the window, where Velda still stood, unmoved. She hadn't looked at me once since it all unfolded. Her reflection on the glass was sharper than her presence in the room. I stepped closer, enough for her to hear. "You said once I was too soft to survive this world," I said, calm, not bitter. "Turns out, I was just quiet enough to outlast it." She blinked slowly. "You look more like your father these days." I nodded. "He always said truth doesn't need a microphone." There was no apology. I wasn't waiting for one. Later that week, I returned to the office early, just as the cleaning crew was finishing up. The lobby looked the same, but the energy was different. Lighter. The whispers had shifted. There were no glances behind backs. Just people. Working. And breathing. Marla's nameplate had been removed. Her office door repainted. Mallory had turned in her resignation, citing a need to realign with her values. I didn't stop her. I walked past the front desk, where a new framed poster now hung beside the mission statement. It featured a quote, mine. Silence gave me strength, but truth gave me my voice. The receptionist smiled at me, not nervously, not out of obligation, just genuinely. I nodded, continued to my office, and spent the morning reviewing proposals. Lucian and the new head of HR joined me mid-afternoon to finalize the company's first formal code of ethical collaboration. We outlined policies on author credit, project oversight, and whistleblower protection. For the first time, we were naming what no one had dared to describe before: gaslighting, sabotage, performative allyship. Lucien signed the draft, handed me a pen. "This wouldn't exist without you," he said simply. "It shouldn't have needed me," I replied, "but it does now." The next morning, a new message pinged into my inbox. Subject: "I owe you an apology. From Mallory Penn." I stared at it for a full minute before opening. She admitted she knew what was happening, that she let it happen, that she told herself she was just trying to survive, that she wasn't proud of how she stayed silent. I didn't reply. I archived the email, but I didn't delete it. A few weeks later, Velda stopped by without calling. She walked slowly through the hallway, said hello to a few people she didn't recognize anymore. She didn't ask for a tour. She didn't mention Marla. She just stood near the glass wall in my office, watching the city outside. "I came to see it," she said. "The place that changed everything." I poured her a cup of tea. No milk, no sugar. Just how she liked it. She looked around. "You run this now?" "I lead it," I corrected. She nodded. "It's cleaner, sharper." We didn't talk about what happened. There was nothing to revisit. She had made her choices. I had made mine. But as she left, she paused at the doorway. "You never needed fixing," she said. "Just space." That night, I closed my laptop for the last time that week. The new partnership paperwork was finalized. Monroe Analytics would begin sponsoring leadership scholarships for women of color pursuing degrees in data science and engineering. The first cohort had already been selected. 4 students, bright, sharp, quiet, but not invisible. As I turned off the lights and headed out, there was no applause, no spotlight, just a soft stillness that settled around me like a coat I'd sewn for myself, stitch by stitch. They called it revenge, but I never needed them to fall. I just needed room to rise. You know, I used to think being quiet meant being weak, that staying calm meant giving up. But I've learned that silence, when chosen, can be power. And sometimes the strongest move you'll ever make is to stand your ground without raising your voice. If you're watching this and you've ever felt invisible, at work, in your family, in your own story, I want you to know, you're not alone. And more importantly, you are not powerless. I didn't get here by luck. I got here by paying attention, by keeping records, by listening when no one else would, by choosing not to become like the ones who tried to erase me. And if there's anything I've learned, it's this. You don't have to destroy anyone to reclaim yourself. Just stop shrinking. So let me ask you, have you ever been in a room full of people and still felt unseen? How did you find your way back to yourself? Or maybe you're still trying? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story touched something in you, even just a little, drop a 1 in the comments or tell me where you're watching from. If you didn't like it, I want to hear that too. Tell me why. Let's talk about it. No filters here. And if you want more stories like this, raw, real, and full of the quiet power so many of us carry, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That way, you'll never miss the next voice that finally gets to be heard.